Hello, Soulboy 82. It's that random content channel. Now you might wonder why I'm posting all my videos on Vapor 87's account at the minute. It's because my computer that I was logged into, and I'm not all that great at remembering passwords, blah 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 blah, is in the shop having a screen repair, so all these books. Anyway, right, I'm giving you your second instalment of Parkhurst Tales. Norman Parkhurst Tales. One of the most like roughest jails. It's not actually in England. It's on the Isle of Wight, and it's just a very strange place to be, right? This guy's been done jail with all sorts. I think I told you all this before anyway. So right, number two, his arrival at jail. I woke immediately, sat halfway up. It was purely a reflex action. I couldn't actually recall hearing the bolt being drawn, the lock shooting back, or even the door opening, but something just roused me. Now, through my sleep-dazed eyes, I could see the crusher screws wedged in my doorway. There must have been 10 of them. Do you know what? How you feeling, mate? All hatless. Now, that's a bad sign, trust me. That means you're getting fucked up. Right, a frozen of fear followed by a rush of adrenaline brought me fully awake. Whatever it was, the situation was serious. You just didn't have 10 screws coming into your cell at 6:30 on a Saturday morning. Now, believe me, you don't. Saturdays is like a no-go for getting spins. You think you're alright over the weekend, usually. Right, that's for my opinion. Right, pack your kit, said the white shirt, meaning screw. It was obviously a PO, that's your principal officer, or an SO, meaning a senior officer. A PO is usually what you get on your landing, like just a landing officer. Thank you, baby. Good joints always for kids tell a story, that's what we need. Right, so, pack your kit, said the white shirt, who was obviously PO and SO. Now, I'm going to tell you something, this is what they call Shanghai you. Shanghai to fucking just stick you out on basically, on a sweatbox and throw you wherever the fuck they want without telling you for no apparent reason. It's horrible. You have to explain to your family and all that. Anyway, I want to get into the story, stop going on myself. All I'm going to do now is just tell you some of the lingo that you won't understand. I'll tell you what it means. Right, so PO, principal officer, SO, senior officer. Right, I knew that it was a waste of time to argue. These were just foot soldiers acting under orders. Well, it's a bit weird that because the SO is the senior officer, so they weren't under orders unless it was direct from the governor. You might as well argue with robots. The decision had already been made and they hadn't been part of the decision-making process. Just tell me if I'm going to choke you or out of jail, I said. Choke you means like down the block means like segregation sort of thing, like Charles Bronson, Mickey Peterson from over here, who still isn't out of jail and never killed anybody, should be out of jail, but I don't know why he isn't. Anyway, he looked at me, pausing while he made his decision. You going out of jail, he said. Sometimes that's a good thing. So, like I said before, he was being shanghaied. It wasn't the first time. My only concern now was, could I take all my stuff with me? If I left it behind to follow me on, all sorts of things could go missing. I'm not going about my kit, Governor, so just give me 15 minutes to pack up, I said. He weighed this up, then he agreed. He probably figured that if he had me dragged out, it'd take time anyway. Then there would be the legacy of dealing with my pals when they were unlocked later. It was a sensible decision. I quickly threw everything into 4 large locked kit boxes that I had under my bed. I'd been in that selling Wellwood Scrubs for 2 years, yet every trace of my occupation was boxed and gone in 20 minutes. I just want to bump in again there and say, right, you have something called volumetric control in all prisons, especially when you're Cat A's. And what happens is you're supposed to be able to put all your stuff in one large box for your bedding, and then you have stuff for food and toiletries and that, and it should really, I think it's supposed to be 2 boxes that are 18 inches by 18 inches and like I think 18 inches deep, so you know, it's just a fucking big cube. But it never goes that way, because you got your stereo and all the stuff that you buy in there. You have to leave loads of stuff. But anyway, I sat in reception reflecting on what I was leaving and what lay ahead. I felt a deep sense of sadness for the loss of all the friends that I was going to be leaving behind. But I had to stifle these feelings to gear myself up for the challenge to come, because you haven't got a clue where you're going, have you? By the time the escort was ready to leave, it was nearly 9 a.m. I was expecting a visit from my mother and sister that very morning. Now I was going to miss it. It's always a fucking case. It wasn't worth mentioning as a Cat A man. They wouldn't tell my family I was leaving. They're not allowed to tell you anything when you're a Cat A, right? They're not allowed to tell your family, not allowed to tell you, and that's why they do it early. And they usually send out a dummy van without, that's not got you in, then maybe another one, and then what they'll do is they'll send you out in maybe sometimes in a taxi. It's fucking weird. Anyway, ironically, as we drove out the gate in a green van with the tinted windows, so it's like I'm fucking psychic, this, I'm telling you. Right, we passed my mother and sister waiting to come in, and how sad's that? They were close enough to touch, yet I couldn't even let them know that I was in the van. How I hated those fucking bastards for the unnecessary suffering they caused my family and me. Soon we were on the road. I had no idea where I was going, and I won't give the screws the satisfaction of asking. They might not have told me anyway. I sat there and I tried to work it out for myself. The further we went, the easier it would be to figure out my destination. We were heading south, so that made it easy. There were only 2 Cat A jails south of the Scrubs, Albany and Parkhurst, both on the Isle of Wight. Now, Parkhurst, as I told you on the last one, is a fucking monster. Baby, can I have a tray, please? And a lighter as well, please. I couldn't see it being... She's brilliant to me. She does all this for me while I'm telling you these crap stories. Can I have a lighter as well, please, with it? One sec, what? Thank you. She's great. Right, so yeah, as I said about the Shanghai, and so he is being proper Shanghaied here. And as the name of the book states, Parkhurst tells, so if we know he's gone from fucking Wormwood Scrubs, he's just told he's going south, yeah, he's going to go to Parkhurst. That's something you really don't want. Anyway, both on the Isle of Wight, I couldn't see it being Albany, as I'd been Shanghaied from there 2 years previous for an escape attempt, followed by a tear-up. Tear-up means that he's gone off with the screws. The officers, screws are officers. They certainly wouldn't want me back. The feeling was mutual. Yeah. The thought of Parkhurst didn't exactly frighten me, but I didn't take it lightly either. I'd heard so many stories about the place. It had the reputation of being Britain's toughest jail. I'd been there, and I was fucking scared when I went there. There had been a bad riot there in '69, brutally put down by the screws. Parkhurst had been seen several murders and countless stabbings and cautions. It was a jail to sort the men from the boys. I felt that I could handle it, but as with any serious challenge, I couldn't help but have some misgivings. Now later on when I get into some of these other chapters, you're going to hear some really fucked up shit and you'll realise why you think America was bad. Listen, sentences might be worse, hundreds of years and death sentences and that, but fuck me, this is bad. Anyway, we duly reached Southampton. We drove onto a ferry. Any thoughts of a breezy walk on the deck were quickly dashed. We all sat in the darkness of the hold, and half an hour later we drove off at Ryde. The island, as always, looked quite beautiful. It was a sad irony that such a place should be blighted by the presence of Albany and Parkhurst. The lovely surroundings made the jail seem that much grimmer. Suddenly we turned off the road to be confronted by a massive pair of wooden gates set in a weather-beaten gate lodge. The immediate impression was one of age. The chipped brickwork, the rusting iron, all showed the decay years. Now just let me dive in there. It's like, you look at Strangeways and that, I mean, I don't know if you know where Strangeways is, it's actually Chpt Manchester. You look at Walton and that, they leave the jails, they don't make them look like nice and new, like places like Oak Course and Forest Bank and that. They leave them like that old and decrepit looking. You see the lime scale down the walls, that, and when you get in there, it's kind of not frightening. You feel a bit broken. You feel like, oh fuck, this is what my life's gonna be. It's horrible, believe me. Right. So grim is a word often used to describe jails, but Parkhurst personified all that was grim. It was as if all the grief and misery that it had witnessed had lined and cracked its facade, just as misery, cracks and lines an old person's face. There was an air of hopelessness about the place. Nothing new could come to Parkhurst. It had experienced it all before. It had eroded the youth of so many spirited young men, and it would do the same to so many more. Inside the gate lodge, it was just as depressing. Surly, chunky, middle-aged screws went about the business at their own pace. The outside world would have to slow down. It was now in the domain of Parkhurst, and Parkhurst was not going to be rushed for anyone. Any man. We drove through a big green iron gate, past some low buildings. We stopped outside of reception. We all got out the van, and I went in with the screw I was handcuffed to, while the others unloaded my boxes. The cuffs were then removed. A stern-faced screw was waiting behind the counter. There was no negotiation. He stated what was allowed at Parkhurst and what wasn't. I'd entered the reception with several boxes. I left with one. The rest would stay in the property room until I moved on to a more liberal jail. Carrying my box, I walked up a steep hill towards the wings. There were no neat paths or flower beds, just dirt, gravel, weeds and rubble. We entered D-wing through a dingy corridor. It was quiet and deserted. I realised that it must be the dinner time bang-up. There was a con sitting on the hot plate just inside the gate. As he looked at me, a smile lit up his face. It was Jeff Bunning, a little raver who'd been in the Albany trouble with me 2 years before. Little raver just means a little madhead. "I ain't Norman," he said. "You come to a right piss hole here." I nodded a quick hello as he swept past. Within seconds, we were into A-wing. A cell was open on the wands. The wands meaning the ones landing, the first landing when you go in. And I went inside with my box, one box. The door banged shut behind me, which it does. As soon as you land in a jail, you can't come out for the first night. Right, I sat down in a dirty, dusty, dingy cell that obviously had not been occupied for weeks. Apart from my encounter with a reception screw, not one word had been said to me, and I'd arrived at Parkhurst. Just before 2 p.m, the wing was unlocked. I heard a considerable hubbub as men hurried on the landings and clattered down the stairs. As I left my cell, I nearly bumped into someone coming in. The fat, balding face above the massive chest broke into a broad grin. It was Ken Cohen, an old pal of mine who I hadn't seen for several years. Then he'd been doing a 5 furlong firms. In the early 60s, the twins had several frontmen running frauds for them. Sometimes these frontmen would forget who was really running things. It was Ken's job to remind them. So let me tell you what a long firm is. A long firm's like it's a fraud. It's a front. You run a business, but you do like protection and shit like that. And so, like he says there, some people forget and they actually start thinking they are running that business, which isn't a business. It's just a front, and they've got to be told to listen. It's not yours. You're just doing something for us. You're getting paid like any other dickhead would. So a Jewish boy who knew his way around a pound note. Ken was a big lump, a fattish 16 stone with a bull neck. His most striking feature was his chest. Heavy bench presses had pumped it up to the most enormous proportions. Ken was no lump and thug though. He had both intelligence and style. His trademark had been to walk into the office of the offenders, all booted and suited, complete with an expensive briefcase. He'd start off reasonably enough, but at some point in the conversation would suddenly pull a steel hatchet from the briefcase and embed it in the desk in front of the petrified fraudsman. If the latter had had the presence of mind to look carefully, he would have noticed that Ken had gone to the trouble of having the hatchet gold-plated. No doubt this concession to style was lost on most of them. "Glad to see you, Norman," he said, now as he threw his arms around me and hugged me. "Come and meet some of the fellas." We walked out onto the ones to find that a small crowd had gathered. I was introduced to about 10 fellas. I immediately felt at ease, realising that I was in the company of my own kind. They were all Londoners. Most were robbers, but a couple were in for just violence. Although I'd never met any of them before, some I had heard of, and most were friends of friends. About half were A-men like myself. I began to feel more at home. Amen, by the way, like I said, cat is. In most jails, Londoners stick together. It was almost traditional that they welcome one of their own on arrival. They do that in pretty much every city guy or whatever town, like I'm Oldham, going, all the Oldham boys stick together. It should be like that. Anyway, Saturday afternoon is a time of high activity in the majority of jails. It used to be, now everybody wears locked up since COVID. Most cons arranged to do something or other. There were visits, racing, sports on the telly and outside association in the compound. Fellas made the various excuses about prior commitments and said they'd see me later. "Come on, I'll show you about the place," Ken said. "It's a bit of a filthy fucking pisshole, but the screws leave you right alone here. That's why I don't mind it all. We walked through to D-Wing, then along the corridor through which I had entered a couple of hours earlier. We stepped outside to the same steep hill, but this time I was going down. Ken pointed out the Chpt to me on the right. The Chpt being the block I said, like segregation. Its tiny wired covered exercise yard on the left was a separate building surrounded by high walls. This prison within a prison, the security wing housed Ron and Reggie Cray, universally known as the twins. A couple of IRA men and several others doing exceptionally long sentences. The place bristled with security devices, cameras pointing in all directions. At the bottom of the hill we turned sharp right, then came to an open gate on our left. We went through into the compound. There were several workshops at the far end, both brick built and prefabricated. Immediately in front of us was a large tarmac football area. It adjoined a tarmac basketball court. Both were full of people. The football area, however, was ridiculously overcrowded. There must have been 40 players crammed onto the three-quarter size pitch. They were dressed in a wildly different and bizarre assortment of clothes. One big athletic-looking fellow was dressed from head to toe in white vest, white shorts, white socks and white trainers, making him look like a fucking professional sportsman. Others had on drab prison-issue gym kits and looked like the brash street kids at play. Most were dressed in their normal prison clothes though, charging about in overall shirts and shoes. Right in the middle of this motley throng of all people was an elderly fellow with a badly crippled leg. He was dressed in overalls and a very long khaki-coloured raincoat. A blue beret was pulled down tightly around his ears. It could have been like Ben Hill. He certainly wouldn't have looked out of place. Needless to say, under these conditions, I've lost my shit. The quality of the football left a lot to be desired. In fact, it wasn't even football as I'd ever seen it played before. The pitch was so crowded that it was impossible to run with the ball. As soon as it appeared, the players would dash at it wildly with their feet. It reminded me of those amusement arcade games where at the flick of a lever, miniature wooden footballers swung a leg at a little plastic ball. There were a lot of nutters here, Norman, Ken said, probably feeling that some explanation was due. Some of them are quite dangerous, but we're a strong firm here, and none of them come near us. I'd been looking carefully at the cons and already noticed the high proportion of crazy-looking ones. Nearly everyone looked aggressive or tough. Central Casting could have hired them out en masse as a prize crew for a pirate film. It was immediately obvious that Parkhurst was half prison, half fucking loony asylum. It was quite depressing to think that this was how the authorities had classified me. And that's where I'm just going to stop for a bit because I don't like the videos to go on too much. And you'll see me soon. Over 82, over out, love you, bye bye. Subscribe, please, bye bye.